it's still a breach of security safeguards if something goes wrong because of the lack of that safeguard. So, we say we've had a breach. Now we're looking at, is it a reportable breach? So, a reportable breach happens when there is a real risk of significant harm. So, we pull apart that phrasing. When we look at significant harm, it's a very broadly defined term. Includes harm, humiliation, damage to reputation, relationships, loss of employment, et cetera, et cetera. It's a fairly broad statute. It's a fairly broad term. I mean, that doesn't include simple things like irritations, but the odds are, if there's a significant impact to the individual, to the affected individual, it is probably going to be covered by the significant harm. So then we get to kind of the big piece that we have to look at. So, how does an organization determine real risk of significant harm? And there's two factors that have to be looked at. The first is the sensitivity of the information, which kind of goes back to this largely. The sensitivity of the information. Some information is almost always going to be sensitive. Financial information, health information. It's almost always going to be considered sensitive. But we have to consider context as well. So if we look at things like a customer list. So the example we have for customer lists is a list of your customers and their email addresses or something like that. It's probably not that sensitive. If it's just a list of names and addresses, it's probably not actually that sensitive. But if it's a list of names and contact information, and that list is made clear that those are high-income individuals, or that they're using a particularly sensitive service. All of a sudden, that the context around the information that's been disclosed changes the evaluation of whether that information is sensitive or not. And so then we get into the probability of misuse, which is kind of one of the biggest considerations you're going to have. We have to really think about what's the likelihood that whatever harm might occur from the sensitivity of the information is actually going to come to pass. So we look at things like, was the information encrypted? If you've lost the device, say you have a device with 1,000 consumer records on it, and it's been stolen out of your car. If that's just on an open USB, then we can assume that it's going to be accessed and it can probably pretty easily be used. If it's a password protected USB, somebody with physical possession of that USB could probably figure out a way, or could probably find a way to get through that password. Same as a laptop. It's not particularly difficult for a motivated individual to remove the hard drive from a password protected laptop and put it into another device to get access to information. That said, though, if you have device level encryption, so if the device itself, so if the hard drive, the computer itself is protected or is encrypted, we can be fairly certain that information is not going to be accessible. Certainly not in any kind of a reasonable context. So the protections you have around the information can take you up out of your breach reporting obligations. That's why it's important to speak to your technologists to kind of understand, how to best protect this information. If you're ever looking for a reason to up your encryption levels, this is a good one. And so there's a whole series of questions we have in the guidance document. I'll link to at the end. Again, we're looking for, is there any evidence that the person was the information disclosed publicly, so you don't know who has the information? Is there, if you were hacked, and it looks like that the hacker was coming in looking for these financial records, we can assume they're probably going to find a way to use them. On the other hand, if you accidentally email a financial record to a person that you have a reasonable amount of trust in, and immediately contact that person and have them and make them kind of say, okay, I need you to delete that. I need you to delete that information, and you have a reasonable level of certainty that information has been erased, and the probability of misuse is next to zero. That's a breach that would require a record to be kept, but that wouldn't be a reportable breach. Yes.
Can you talk about what's happened in the past months with Equifax? There's publicly been acknowledged it was a breach, and what was the role of your office?
Sure. So I can't speak much to Equifax because we do have an ongoing investigation of them. So when that breach became public, we contacted Equifax, and I believe it was a commissioner-initiated investigation that we opened against them. It may have been a complaint that was brought by an individual. I can't recall which. But almost immediately we opened an investigation of it, and because of the confidentiality requirements under the law, I can't really speak much to what's happening within that investigation. It is progressing. I don't have a particular timeline. Hopefully, it's within the next few months we're able to get a report about that. But
part two of the question: is it fair for all of us to think that anyone in this room might be at risk because of that?
Can we repeat the question, please?
Yes. So the question is, are you speaking as you as an individual, or are you in your professional role?
Myself as an individual, and anyone in this room as an individual.
Okay. So the question was, are individuals at risk because of the Equifax breach? And I suppose the answer is it's entirely possible. There were records of Canadians that were lost or that were accessed in the course of that breach. So it's not as extensive, or it's not the same percentage of the population as the Americans, but there were Canadians, especially Canadians who've done any kind of have any financial products coming out of the U.S. But yes, that it's entirely possible that your information was accessed. You should, if your information was accessed, you should have been notified by this point by Equifax. Yes.
All of us, people and professionals that are licensed, are subject to these stringent rules. However, the biggest thing right now, scam, is the CRA calling. And it's very real, and it's definitely causing significant harm. Because even if you have call display, it comes up GOC/DOC, and they talk very nice to you and then read you a threatening thing that if you don't do this and don't do that, we're going to go after you. Now, That's definitely causing significant harm to a lot of seniors as well. Why cannot the government shut that phone line down? They know what it is. I phoned in, and they said, oh yes, we have several complaints about that. Then cut that line off. Why can't you do that?
So, I can't necessarily speak to that because it's a criminal matter, and so it's not something that would fall under our jurisdiction. I can say it is something that the government again does take quite seriously. They have done just within the past week or so. There was a significant raid on a call center in India from which a lot of these calls were originating, trying to again shut us down at the source. But you know, there's challenges with the fact that the multiple phone numbers are being used, and the fact that you know a lot of these calls aren't originating from Canada, so there's law enforcement collaborations that need to take place. Again, I'm just simply not aware of the details of that information or the details of that kind of investigation because it's not within our jurisdiction.
Well, it comes up with 1-800 number, and if you call that number back, they answer it, Canada Revenue Agency. So I mean that's total fraud.
Yeah.
They should not be able to use the telephone lines. That's all I'm getting at, and the Canadian government should certainly take that into serious contemplation and do something about it.
Yeah, and you know,
But
again,
they can't, it's not in our jurisdiction. They can't, because it's not in this jurisdiction.
Yeah,
It's coming from offshore.
Yeah, they're doing what they can about it. It's absolutely something that's being taken seriously. But again, because it's not something that falls under PIPA. It's a criminal matter. I can't kind of speak to what the progress of that.
I called the OPP and I also called Canada.
Waste of time.
They said the same thing. They got lots of phone calls about that. But it's our seniors, mostly, that are getting built out of thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
We could invest for it.
All right. Any other questions about this real risk, the determination of real risk? Okay. So one of the interesting questions that came up, and our answer had to change between our draft guidance and our finalized guidance, is this notion of who actually reports the breach. Because under legislation, the requirement is that the organization with control of the data it is the one that's required to report the breach. Unfortunately, there's no actual definition of who is under control, and it can get hazy when you're using third party processors. If you're sending information to a third party again for processing, who's in control, who needs to be reporting the breach at that point. And so where we've gotten to, PIPED's accountability principle, it makes it clear that even when organizations are using third-party processors, they remain accountable for that information, for the information and the practices of the third party that they're using. So the reporting information most of the time is going to be the organization that collected the initial information. So even if you have again, passed information off to a third party and they have a breach, it's going to be your responsibility to be reporting that breach to our organization, which again makes it critical that you have the appropriate contractual measures to make sure that your third party processors have the appropriate safeguards in place, that they're as much as possible not going to be the source of a breach, but also that if there is a breach that happens at that processor, that they are required to tell you about it and to give you all the information that you're going to need in order to make this report. So when we're doing a breach report, so we've hit the real risk of significant harm or ROSH threshold. So walk through the process of actually what happens for the